Hi there, Betty. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Computer's working, that's always a good thing.
Betty.
Hi, Vicki Kraus is on.
Hi, Vicki.
Good evening, Vicki.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Vicki.
How are you?
Hi, Vicki.
Hello. I know it's 5 and some people are still joining, so maybe we'll give it a minute or two.
Yes.
No, it's Mac.
Hey there, Mac.
Hey, John.
I think we're joined by Maurice. Hi, Maurice.
Hello, everybody.
Nanette, do you think we have everybody who's on the committee?
No,
On?
no, we only have 4.
Okay. I know Eric is not.
Eric
able
is
to
not
join.
attending, yes.
Right.
Let me check. Janae is now in. So now we have 5.
So who are we missing?
Bill Johnson and Jeff Sattler.
Okay. Why don't we need another minute?
Mhm,
And then if not, we can get started because we have quorum.
mhm. Yes.
So we are at 5:02, and I know we have a quorum and everybody's time is important. So why don't we call the meeting to order? A motion to open the meeting. Is there a second?
I'll second
A
that.
second.
Mhm, thank you.
Great.
So I'll do-
Can you go through the roll call?
Yes. Vicky Kraus,
Yes.
Betty Esposito,
Present,
Eric Hagopian, Bill Johnson, Maurice Lindsay,
Present,
Janae McDonald,
Present.
Jeff Sattler, and Max Starks.
Present.
Thank you.
Is Betty on?
yes.
Yes, I called her. Mhm,
Okay, I'm sorry.
mhm.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for your time and everyone who volunteered to be on the committee. It's clearly a very important issue because we had almost the entire board volunteer to be on the ad hoc committee to review the discontinuation of the program decision. And so Betty and I just wanted to give an update. Betty and I spoke with Chair Murrin, was kind enough to set up a conversation for Betty and I last week with Attorney Ken Tachi, just to make sure that we understood the open meeting laws and requirements. And with Nanette's assistance, she is, making sure that we meet all of those requirements. But Ken was very helpful in outlining the parameters and what our roles and responsibilities were. And I think we feel very comfortable that we're moving ahead with his guidance. But I would also offer that if at any time anybody on the committee feels like it would be important to invite Ken to a meeting to ask him any questions, he is available, although he said his presence was not required, but he would make himself available if anybody had any questions or wanted him to come to a meeting at any point. So Ken is available as a resource if anybody has questions on the process or the open meeting requirements. So, if at any time somebody feels the need, please, make that suggestion and we'll get him on a future agenda. Betty, do you want to talk about sort of the process and where we want to go with the committee and how we want to move forward?
Sure. Vicki and I put together in the items to discuss We started out with, and this is not limited, if these can be tweaked, but we started out with a discussion on the scope and the parameters of the committee review of the program discontinuations. Second, to determine specific documentation information needed to review the decision, what there might be that we feel we would like to see in black and white that is needed for our review. And then also to establish a meeting and schedule and a time frame for our completion, so that it isn't ad infinitum. So that's where we are right now. So to really start the meeting, just thinking about and input on our discussion on the scope and parameters and to review the discontinuations. Vicki, any
Yep.
of your thoughts?
So the thought process was not to come with Betty and I's agenda to this meeting about what we thought was necessary, but to have this first meeting as an open discussion with the other committee members about what we would like to see and review about the information that was gathered to come to the decision on the program discontinuation, and then use that as the jumping off point for then our further review as to whether or not as a committee we would be recommending to Ways and Means and then ultimately to the full board any decision to bring some or all of them back, and whether or not that would come with some funding from the board to support those programs, and what that process would be. And also from a timing perspective, clearly the first semester is already launched, but if this is something that potentially, whether it's a second spring semester return or a fall return, there would be a lot of work necessary in order to get that probably back on the calendar, and staffing and students, reaching out to students. And so we thought, doing this in an expeditious manner was appropriate to, for everyone's benefit, to either move forward with what we have, or, if there's going to be some changes, get those going.
This is Trustee Stark. So is it feasible that we could bring these programs back for the spring semester? Or are we really looking at the fall of next year? Is that more realistic?
Mac, I don't know the answer to that question, and I think until we have, at least for me, until I have a better understanding of sort of what we've undone, it's hard to say. I'm assuming that we've got some students who are still on campus being taught out of their program. So I don't know the answer to that question, but I still think in everybody's best interest, we don't want to rush the process, but I do think it would be important to make a decision and move forward, given that this has been such a hot topic and had a lot of conversation around it since the decision, back in June.
Hi there, this is Bill Johnson.
Oh, great. Thank you for joining, Bill.
Well, I had the email, and I guess an email got sent out at 4:53, which I was already had the other one printed out. So Jeff and I we're on by ourselves for about 5 minutes.
Oh, sorry, Jeff, are you on?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, so we still don't have.
So I apologize. I'm not sure what I missed, but before we entertain bringing back any programs, we need to know what the capital costs are to keep the programs, i.e. any building renovations and equipment and tools update. And also, I would like to know the count of students whom actually went into the chosen profession, like mechanical shop. How many students actually completed the program and went into and got a job at a shop? and what the percentage of students who actually got the certification. So if it started out with 20 and only 10 got the certification, and then only 3 went on to go in the shop. I'm not saying those are the numbers. I just want to know what the numbers are.
Right.
We really need to know that for each of the 7 programs before we make any intelligent decisions. And I thought that Dr. Cook has all that information, or a lot of it, because I remember him calling the trustees as he's going through this process.
So Bill, where we were starting was to talk about what the committee would want to see initially as information to review the decision that was made, and, you know, use that as the jumping off point for, you know, likely requesting additional information. But it seems, and, you know, clearly this is an open conversation, but it seems like part of the conversation and discussion has been a lack of understanding and data to understand where, you know, how the decision was made around these specific 7 programs. So it might help to understand the decision and what was prepared and produced in order to make that, and then the committee could then use that to say, you know, potentially we want more, we agree, or we agree in part, but we want more on certain, you know, I think until I understand what the basis and the process and the assumptions and the information that was gathered in order to make those decisions, I don't necessarily know what I'm missing, because I don't know what we have.
All right, I guess that's where I'm a little confused. I remember Dr. Cook calling me and said he was calling each trustee individually to review the programs and some of the reasoning. And at least I know I had in-depth conversations. Maybe, I don't know. So anyway, maybe that's why I feel more comfortable with the decision. So I asked questions when he called me. Did he not call all the trustees or individually?
I can only speak for myself. I did speak with President Cook. You know, all of the information that has been disseminated so far, I think has been given to each of the trustees and sits out on board pack, as Nanette pointed out to all of us.
Right.
But at this point, the only piece of information that I've seen that specifically addressed the program review, which was at the request of Trustee Starks as a follow-up to the decision. And it was you know, I think pretty much a listing of all of the programs, how much they were losing, and which ones were chosen, and a couple of anecdotal comments. But that may be all there is. I don't know that. I think,
Okay.
you know, we would want to understand if there was anything else. What was it? What were the assumptions? What was the process? And how was the decision arrived at? And, you know, then we could use that as a jumping off point. But clearly there's a lot of other members on this committee, and I guess I'd ask for other commentary from others about what they would want to see as part of this process, and, you know, how we would move forward. Does anybody else have any input or questions or commentary?
Yeah, this is Trustee Stark. So I mean, I think we cover what we essentially need. It's what are all the things that's going to take to bring back each program. You know, so let's understand the costs. Let's understand the resources that goes into it. Right? And I would assume that was part of the decision. And to your point, Vicki, we haven't seen any analysis that kind of lays that out. So I don't know what we're working with here, but I mean, I think we pretty much covered. We need the detail that helps us understand what would go into bringing each one of the programs back separately. I know Trustee Johnson referenced a couple items that I think is spot on, and you did as well, Vicky, but I think we covered that.
This is Trustee McDonald. I just want to touch on that really quickly. So my concern is that is very valid information that we should have and we should be gathering, but I'm also wondering how we are going to make it relative to the other programs. So if we are requesting that information, are we also going to request it for other programs the same way when we received the program margins, we received it for all of the programs, so that we're not in a situation where maybe we're looking at cosmetology or automotive and if the margins seem unfavorable, but in comparison to what? And I think I'm just wondering if anyone has an appetite to see the same information across all programs the same way we did for the financial margins as well, so that we're able to make an informed decision.
So I guess as a follow-up question to that, are you suggesting that there would be other programs reviewed, or that there would be perhaps specific items associated with additional information as an add-on to that? So my thought on something like what you're describing is, if in addition to having the information that was already presented that showed, each program and its loss, it would be helpful to know how long have those programs been in existence? How many students can we handle? How many are enrolled over some historical period? Is that what you're suggesting? I mean, I don't think we're here to review every program. I mean, we were specifically put together as a subcommittee to review the 7 programs that have been impacted. But is there something in that review that would help you, or you'd want to see in comparison to the others that were left, untouched?
Yes, so the second half of that, I just think that it would be helpful, to see that in comparison to the other programs. Because if we find out that for whatever one of these 7 programs, X amount of students have graduated or received a certificate, and then X amount of students are now in that field, I'm just wondering, is that data that we're collecting for other programs as well? Not that we're reviewing them, but I would just hate to see a situation where we say, oh, we're only, for Bill's example, 3 students are in that field. Well, how do we know that there aren't other programs that are having similar outcomes? And so what role does that play in the removal of the 7 programs?
Yes, and I think, I don't disagree. I think that's a criteria that we can certainly ask about. I don't know how ultimately that would be weighted, because I don't know that we have any control over who gets a job and who doesn't, and what their own personal circumstances are once they graduate with the certificate. Someone may have a life change or, situation where they don't necessarily pursue at this point in time that career that they've received training for. So we can certainly ask for that information if it's even available, but I think we would then need to determine how we weight all of the information that we receive. It's probably not all going to be equal.
Right. So then I would say, to what extent do we want to gather the information? Like, how far do we want to go with the follow-up of the student then at that point? Because you make a great point. So now I'm wondering, is it necessary to know how many students are actually placed in the work field based on their program that they were in? Or is it just necessary to know how many are enrolled and how many completed? Or do we just want to know how many were or are enrolled?
I think the were and are enrolled would be something we'd easily be able to obtain, because I'm looking back, and there was a presentation, for example, it said discontinued program head count, and automotive fall 29 students, spring 30 students. Cosmetology fall was 33, spring 19.
So Betty, what I think is missing from that is that we don't know how many we can accommodate.
Right,
So without knowing how many students we can accommodate in each program, it's hard to say whether those numbers are 10% or 50 or 80 of
Right.
what we can accommodate. So I guess that what I was hoping is a starting point is to say that at this point, we're here because we don't feel that we have received sufficient information to understand how this decision was made. So perhaps what we need to do is request any and all information that was gathered, what was the process, and what were the assumptions that were used, so that we can start with at least an understanding on how leadership made the decision. And then we might need additional information, we might not, but if we need additional information, then we'd at least know what's already there, what was already gathered, and how do we then move forward to say, okay, we have enough now, and if we want to bring that program back because we believe that it is significant to the mission of the college, then how much is that going to cost? And then we're in a position to know and make a recommendation if we choose to do that to Ways and Means and the board. But I don't, at this point in time, feel that we have a clear understanding of what was gathered, and perhaps what we already have is all there is, and that would be an answer, to our question as well. Maybe there isn't anything other than what's been received, but I don't know what assumptions were made in gathering that information, or what other detail might have been behind the summaries that we received on the programs.
Trustee Kraus, this is a Trustee Stark. So I think we can save ourselves some time, and we should make a list of things that we need, so we can make a determination on whether or not we believe that we should reinstall any of these programs. Because I think all the time that's gone by so far, I think it's fair to say that the analysis that we even would be presented that went into the decisions, it's either not there at all, or it's not credible enough for us to feel comfortable with. So I think if we just cut to the chase and,
Okay.
and just ask for, these are the things that we need for each one of these programs. And I think we can get to that point. We should be able to get to that point quicker. And that's
Okay. So would people like to make recommendations on what information they would want to see, and then we can make that request and set up our next meeting and timeframes for receipt of that, so it can be reviewed and discussed at the next meeting?
I think
I'll
that
second
works.
Yes.
Vicki, this is Jeff Sattler.
Yep.
I would like to ask if there's been any correspondence between either the teachers of the programs that were cut or the department heads, their input, that kind of information of their position as to why they should be kept and why it wasn't.
So you would want any communication or recommendations that happened with the individuals in charge of each of those programs?
Yes.
Something, Jeff,
Yep.
like this is Betty speaking. Was there a round table? Was there a one-on-one? Did someone come in and present their program?
Exactly. More from a grassroots, ground level standpoint of how that started.
Okay,
Everyone's position.
Okay.
Trustee Kraus, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I'm clear. I think you asked as a follow-up for each one of us to prepare a list of things that we think we would want as part of the evaluation. Okay, yeah, okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Excuse me, this is Bill Johnson.
Yep.
We're talking about a lot of stuff, like I said, I'd like to see the capital costs and stuff, but
Okay.
don't we think we should have Dr. Cook come in and give us a presentation, the subcommittee a presentation as to why he chose these 7 programs, and then from there we go on this hunt or whatever? I mean, we're being the judge and jury, or we're not listening to any witnesses. That's kind of gets what I agree with Jeff. I would like to see any correspondence between the department heads also. But I mean, I think we should ask Dr. Cook to come before the subcommittee and say, okay, Dr. Cook, here's your chance. You cut 7 programs. The subcommittee was formed. Please convince us. Does that not make sense, or?
Well, I think we're here because the presentations have been made and discussed, and there isn't clarity around how those decisions were made. We have already been discussing this issue. Trustee Starks, is the chair of Ways and Means, requested additional information, at least on one, if not multiple occasions. And we've talked about this, and we've been given information that at this point, I think we've talked about it a little bit, hasn't had the detail that seems to,
Okay.
So I think we have what we have, which is why we're here. It doesn't seem like it's enough. I mean, I'm certainly happy to, have President Cook. I mean, we're going to need to gather this information. We're going to need his assistance to present it. But I don't, again, more opinions are necessary. But I think we're here because the presentations we've had to date have not had the detail that we would anticipate for a decision of this magnitude.
I think this is Trustee Lindsay. The more informed we are about how the leadership came to the conclusion in cutting these programs, I think that it's going to be helpful to us to make a decision whether we should what we should do going forward, whether they're even the decisions were. I mean, we may look at all of this and determine that the original decisions were, if they're based in solid form, based on finance or attendance or whatever the decision were, if we conclude after all this that the decision was sound and don't warrant any further action, then so be it. Or we may look at all this information and be able to reconsider a couple of programs that we want to, providing we're given the information. But I think that from what I'm hearing from everybody is we don't have that solid decision that went into cutting those programs that is sufficient enough for us to make a very, important decision on this. And so in whatever form it may take, whether it's a presentation or written analysis, I keep hearing reference to that some of this information was requested in the past, but it doesn't seem like we have it. So clearly we need information that can help us to make a decision here.
Trustee Lindsay, this is Trustee Starks. I mean, everything you said, I'm in agreement with. But when you think about kind of some would question whether or not the who has the authority to make the decision, and some would say that the president has the authority to make the decision without the board. Some would say that the board should be involved in the decision. But either way, as a board, we should at least be able to review an analysis that we think is credible to then make a decision like this. And right now, certainly me as the head of the Ways and Means Committee, I don't feel like I've seen anything close to analysis. And as Vicki mentioned multiple times, I asked for the analysis that went into making the decision on the program to be shared with the board, and we haven't. All we saw was how much of a loss each program has. That's not an analysis. It's a feeder into an analysis. It should be part of the decision, but not the decision maker in and of itself. So, and then there was a presentation that was done and led by Mr. De Silva and Dr. DeVerley, and they talked to us about, you know, factors from their perspective that they would consider to be the analysis, but none of the trustees from myself, I didn't feel comfortable that in and of itself was adequate enough to at least get me comfortable that we made the right decision or the wrong decision. So I mean, the reason why we're here is really just in search of that. Just help us understand the information that we think is credible enough to make a call, and we may decide that we're not going to make any changes to the decision that was made, but we'd like to have the ability to really look at data that we each feel is sufficient enough to give us comfort that this was the decision, that the decision that was either made was a good one, or we should make some modifications to it. And one of the things that we definitely need to look at as part of this is who else in our broad community offers a program like that. So even if we have two students and only one student gets hired someplace, if no one else within a 90-mile radius offers that program, then that should be a feeder into our decision. But all that said, we're here because we don't feel we have adequate enough information to either feel comfortable with the decision or not.
So Mac, one of the things I'm hearing you ask for is a competitive analysis of who else offers the particular programs that were discontinued within the region, and do we want to define the region as being the Pioneer Valley into northern Connecticut, because we know as Nantucket is a competitor? How do we want to define that? Do we want to give it a regional, mileage circumference, if that's going to be one of our criteria?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think, as you pointed out earlier, I think Dr. Cook would have that information in terms of each program, like who are our competitors, right? Mm-hmm. So that should be a feeder into our the information that we're going to get to make the evaluation 7.
So at the moment, I think I've written down 3 specific requests, and I'm sure that there are more out there, but communication and recommendations that were made about the programs from each chair of the specific programs, I think was 1. 2, the capital cost associated with the programs and continuing them, I think was another request. You're requesting a sort of an analysis of the competitors who provide the programs, who else is out there providing these programs for the students. I'm sure there are other items that we would like to see. If other people want to offer any other.
Vicki, this is Jeff. How about something like a 10-year historic enrollment for these programs? I mean, what has been the enrollment history, perhaps?
Yep.
Something retrospective that, were they 10 years ago at A and now they've dropped down, or they've gone from A up to?
So the historic enrollment, I would assume we would want not just how many, so how many can we accommodate versus how many were in the program? Because again, I think that some of these programs are small, and we could look at them and say, well, they only have 10 students, but maybe we can only accommodate 12. So I think understanding how many students we can accommodate as well as how many are enrolled, so we understand, you know, from more of a percentage, what the demand has been.
I would agree with that, Vicki. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would also like to see something prospective. So for
Yep.
an industry, where do we expect it to go for the next 5 to 10 years? And I've seen some of our competitors now advertising around sort of programs we cut. So it's hard to believe that the programs that others are going to actually put marketing dollars behind a curriculum where there's no need for it.
Okay. So any kind of prospective industry analysis?
Right.
Okay. So in the historical look back, I would want to include in there how many students did we actually have enrolled for the fall? So not just prior years, but how many students did we have enrolled that were impacted by the decision?
Right.
Yes.
I would think it might be helpful to have some information on the costs associated, the cost and numbers associated with the teach out of any students who were like mid-program, who I believe we have a responsibility to continue to provide them so that they can finish up whether it's their associates or their certificate. So I don't think we went from a cost to zero. I think there is still some level of ongoing cost to teach out any students who were midway through their programs.
Mentioned earlier about jobs that were gained after they graduated from the various programs. How did graduates do from each program to be able to be hired into the specific field? Is that something we also want to take a look at? I know, Vicki, you brought up some good points about life changes and that, but you know, just to get a handle on it.
We can certainly ask for it. I don't know if the information is available. That would be something that I will only speak for myself. I would personally weight that very low, because I think, as we know, many students, whether it's STIC or other, you know, colleges or programs, may start down a path, get a degree, and don't necessarily complete their, you know, career in that field. And I wouldn't say that it means that what the program that they were enrolled in led to that decision. But we can certainly ask if there's any, you know, job
Any data
information available
over the years.
I also believe, and we've seen much of the communication, but there may be more, what kind of response or communication has come from the community, and more importantly, from the industry groups associated with these programs, regarding their positions or requests for reconsideration. You know, I anecdotally know that there's been a fair amount of community conversation around some of these programs, and, you know, the concerns that businesses have about not providing this kind of training so that they can have qualified employees in the future. I know we've received, you know, a fair amount of that information in the letters and that were, you know, sent to the college when the decisions were made. But I guess if there's been any further discussions or meetings with industry groups, I do think that's important as well, to not just look at within the college what we think and see, but how is this impacting community employers, and what are their requests and thoughts about it? Because ultimately we're here, to provide some technical training for our students to be able to go out and get good jobs, and it's something we market and sell. And if there have been meetings or communications with industry group leaders about their concerns or requests to bring these programs back, I think that would be important to know.
This is Bill Johnson. I'm a little confused. I said I'd like to know how many students went into the chosen field, the certification. And I think it was you that said, well, life changes and they may not go down that path. But now you're concerned that we have students ready to go into the fields, the chosen fields. I don't know. I'm a little confused.
Betty brought up your point as well, and I've got it on my list, data regarding job information, if we have it available, of how many students. My personal comment was that I would weight that myself personally.
Right, so you want input from the industry to see how it affects them, but that's the other point. A lot of these programs, correct me if I'm wrong, are certificate programs. They're not for an associate's degree per se. I thought there were just certificate programs to get trained in X. Is that a correct statement, or so a lot of these programs part of the associate's degree program to get an associate's degree?
I think that there's a mixture, and perhaps that would be good information to know of the programs that have been discontinued. Which of them provide an associate's degree and which are certificates, and how do those, I know that there are some that are associate's degree programs and some that are probably certificates, but I think the college over the years has looked for input from employers in the region about what is needed to train employees for them in the future, and we have made decisions around that demand to help
you're misinterpreting what I'm saying. I agree with you 100%. We should be taking in the comments from people in the industry, and that's why we need to know how many students are actually going into those industries, because if we're not filling a need, there's a problem there. So I agree with what you're asking. I'm just a little confused with the debate back and forth on the other. That's all.
Okay. So I think, I will run through the list of things that people are requesting to make sure I've gathered all of them, but one of them is definitely data regarding job placement in the industries in these programs in which students have graduated, whether they've received an associate's or a certificate.
Yeah, especially the certificate programs. I think that's really where it's important. But thank you.
Yep. Other information that, and I don't, this isn't going to be the only list. It's not going to be our only opportunity. But, certainly coming up with a starting point to go back to the college's leadership and request information to be gathered for our next, for review, for discussion at our next meeting. I think if we get a good basis of information, at least we have a good starting point. There may be other things that get generated from the initial list that we need further, but want to make sure that we get whatever the folks on the committee are looking for as at least a starting point for our further review and conversation. Other items?
Do we have a sense for, who we should be giving this list to? I mean, I don't know that. I know Dr. Cook would be involved. I don't know that we give Dr. Cook the assignment to get back to us with the detail. So maybe that's something we need to, before we end the call, we need to address as well. Like who's going to gather the detail for us and then provide it to us?
I think, I guess my response to that would be that, you know, we would get the list to Dr. Cook, and that Dr. Cook, if he needed, you know, to engage, you know, his finance group or his chairs or Dr. DeBurley to gather all that information, and I believe all of those folks were part of the original process, that he would make that assessment and what was necessary to, you know, provide the information back to the committee.
I agree with that.
Okay, Dr.
Mac,
Cook, you're on the hook again. If it's not adequate, you're on the hook.
I assumed as much. I assumed as much, working on behalf of the trustees directly, that you'll, you know, firm this up, and then I'll take it from there. Absolutely, I'll work with our team.
Great. We'll if it comes back inadequate, we'll have another conversation.
That's the nature of the board president relationship, for sure.
That's why we're here.
So at the moment, just to recap, the request was made for any communication or recommendations that were made by the specific program chairs around their program discontinuation, or, you know, information that they put forward for the decision-making process. Capital costs associated with continuing the programs, is that correct, Trustee Johnson? What it would cost to continue them going forward?
Correct. It's not so much what it's going to cost to continue it forward. I know a lot of the buildings are in dire need of repairs, and some of the decisions, if I recall the discussions I had with Dr. Cook, was that was part and parcel of some of the discussions, that the building pressures on these programs and the cost to move them and to continue them. I may be wrong, but that's my recollection anyway. So I think that's important, especially with we got such an unfunded liability for building repairs at the college. That's really pressing.
Okay. A competitive analysis on who else is offering, who else offers these specific programs that we're discontinuing. A 10-year historical enrollment analysis on the specific programs that would include how many students we can accommodate versus the enrollment, so we understand, you know, the demand within each program, because some are small and, you know, the numbers may be small, but it doesn't mean that they haven't been important. A prospective industry analysis, if any is available, on, you know, demand for students and employees who are trained in those industries. Any expenses associated with teaching out the students who are midway in their program or certificate, or, you know, whatever, wherever they are, if we have a responsibility to teach them out, how many and what's the cost associated with that. Data on job placement for students who have completed the program. Do we want to give that do we want that to be the same 10-year historical review, or do we want to look at that for a shorter period of time, just so that they know what they have to pull together? Does anybody have any thoughts on a time frame for that? Are we looking back just
I think
last year?
I think the 10-year or so would be a good
Okay.
to look at, especially if it's charted. So if there's a decline, one can obviously see it.
Okay. Any communication or information related to industry groups or industry leaders that has come forward to the college regarding the discontinuation and their recommendations or what they see as, I guess, demand for employees going forward. And then we would want to understand specifically in the programs which ones are associate's degrees and which ones are certificates. And there may be some programs where there's both. They might be both associate's degrees and certificates, but to get a clearer understanding of the programs and what a student completion, what it provides them.
And also on that, Vicky, could we ask the length of the program? Is it a 12-month certificate, 24, or?
Yep. Sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Vicky,
Is that a good?
Vicky, I would just add also wanting to know some demographics around the student makeup for each program.
Yep. Okay. Again, when we ask for this kind of information, are we asking all of it for a 10-year history? So do we want to know the demographics? If we're going to look at the 10-year enrollment history, do we want the demographics as part of that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say something more like 3 years for the demographic, because
Okay.
that could shift, but.
Okay. Okay. Anything else that comes to mind? I mean, this will be a lot of good information to have, and then, as I said, this won't be people's only opportunity to ask for information, but I think we need to put together a list that's adequate enough to get to leadership so that they can begin to prepare it, and then we can review it and discuss it and decide how we move forward from there.
I guess one last thing for me, Vicky, is so we got that loss by program. You know, so that was a 1-year look. I'd like to see that trended. So let's see how all the programs have what it's costed, or how much we lost. Hopefully, maybe not a loss, but what's been the performance over the last 5 years for each one of these programs? All of them, not just the 7, all the programs.
Okay. So an expansion of that information that was provided on all of the programs and their contribution for 5 years.
Right.
Okay. So this is a lot of information that we're going to ask for. So I guess my question is, when would we want to see it? And when do we want to have our next meeting? I would think that, the majority of this is available, but may not be gathered in the fashion that we're going to request it. So is it reasonable to provide 2 weeks to gather this information and send it out to the committee, and then we would schedule a meeting that would be 3 weeks out, so we'd have an opportunity to review the information before we discuss it? And would we want Dr. Cook to present the information that we've requested at that meeting, or just provide it and we'll review it and respond with any additional questions?
Is there any way that we can have, other members of the administration present the information?
We certainly can request that, sure. So I guess let's start with, when do we want this information to be submitted?
I think that's reasonable, Rick, Vicky. 2 weeks for them to get it to us and a week for us to review.
Okay.
I would think that's reasonable.
Okay, so that would mean that the committee would receive the information on October 20th. And we would hold our next meeting on October 27th.
Well, business day is already over. Today's the 6th, so you got to start from the 7th. So tomorrow's the 7th, 2 weeks will be the 21st anyway.
Okay, so the information received on the 21st and our meeting on the 27th.
Just a
Fine by
reminder,
me.
a reminder on the 27th, we got an email about a trustees statewide meeting, 12 to 2 on the 27th. I'm just throwing that one out for that date.
Yep, that's the, if trustees who want to go to the virtual meeting held by the Department of Education. So that would mean the information by October 21st, a meeting October 27th. Nanette, there isn't another meeting of the Board or Ways and Means scheduled for the 27th, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Let me see the next date is the 26th. The Board of Trustee meets on the 26th.
Okay.
Next week.
The 13th is Ways and Means and the 26th is the board, the full board.
So the 21st for information, the 27th for our next meeting. And if we are going to request that individuals attend that meeting to make presentations, whom would we like at that meeting, and specifically what role would they play? Or are we asking President Cook to gather this information with his cabinet and his team, and he would determine who would come to that meeting and present the information? Or are we specifically inviting individuals?
Vicki, this is Jeff. I think. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I'm sorry, Jeff. I didn't mean to walk over you.
All good.
I think we're getting into muddy waters. I think it's up to our relationship as trustees is with the president. His is with the administration. It's up to him to assemble the team to present the information. It's not up to us to go bypass the president. This is I'm on a school committee, and we couldn't bypass the superintendent and request the principal to come to it because the school committee is with the superintendent only, and I believe that's the way it's president to trustees. I don't know, maybe if somebody can expand upon that, but that's I believe we're going into muddy waters.
Well, and my thinking, I was just going to say that we're going to get so much information. I would think we'd want to just talk with Dr. Cook first and, digest all the information and then determine if we need to go to department heads or any other individuals. That's just my thought.
So I think we had determined that we would provide the list of requested information directly to President Cook. He would then determine on his cabinet and staff who he would need to involve in the gathering of the information. So it sounds like we clearly would want President Cook to present the information that we've requested at the next meeting. And Janae, I think it was you who was potentially commenting on whether or not you would want to see other folks present information. did you have someone specifically in mind that you wanted, or a group of people? Did you have somebody else you wanted to
I don't
include in
have-
that presentation?
Yeah, I don't have anyone in particular in mind. I know that we received, a lot of communications from not just members of the community, but I also think members of the faculty in relation to these programs. So maybe it's just something where we review that and, and how it relates to the information that we receive. But I just thought that it would be helpful, to have that inclusion. But considering that the decision ultimately came from Dr. Cook, and not to necessarily put you on the hot seat, Dr. Cook, but I guess it does, also just make sense for him to, be there and to solely answer for the decisions that were made. But I was just thinking about, being inclusive of,
Okay,
multiple.
so I'm hoping that some of what you would be wanting to see would be gathered in Trustee Statler's request for communication, information related to any communications or recommendations or information that was put together by the chairs of the specific program.
Yeah.
That would be shared with us, so we would get hopefully their perspective from that information.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes.
So there's a list of information. Nanette, I think you probably have minutes from this, but I will also put together sort of the list that I've gathered of what we're requesting. We
Yes,
would have that list available to make sure that, President Cook had that, no later than tomorrow, since it's a long list and a lot of information. We would have that information deliverable to the committee members by end of day on October 21st. And our next meeting would be at 5 o'clock on Tuesday, October 27th. And at that meeting, we would be requesting that President Cook present the information that has been gathered as the, main agenda item.
Sounds good.
Is that where folks are?
Yes.
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 I agree with that.
Is there any other business that we haven't covered that anybody wants to bring forward?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Anybody want to second the motion?
I'll second that.
And then next, we do the roll call.
Yes. Vicky Kraus,
Yes.
Betty Esposito,
Yes.
Eric Hagopian, Bill Johnson,
Yes.
Maurice Lindsay,
Yes.
Janae McDonald,
Yes.
Jeff Sattler,
Yes.
and Max Starks.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
all.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Good
All right,
evening.
thanks. Bye-bye.